Diamonds are supposed to represent perfection, but in the cold, glittering showroom of royal jewels, they only represented pain. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and cheap cruelty. I kept my eyes down, my fingers trembling slightly as I polished the glass display case. "Look at her trying to fit that ring on." A sharp, high-pitched voice laughed from across the counter. It was Victoria, a regular customer whose wealth was as vast as her empathy was microscopic. She was surrounded by her usual crowd of thin, elite friends who nodded in vicious agreement. "Some things just don't belong on fat fingers, darling," Victoria whispered, not caring that I could hear every single word. "Those diamonds are meant for elegance, not whatever this is." The humiliation burned hot in my chest, a familiar fire that I had learned to swallow every single day. I was the invisible girl, the plus-size cashier they treated like a piece of cheap furniture. But outside this glass cage, a different kind of storm was brewing on the rain-slicked streets of the city. A black, armored sedan pulled up to the curb, its engine purring like a caged beast. A man stepped out, his tailored suit absorbing the dim city light, his presence cutting through the atmosphere like a razor blade. He was the man who ruled the dark underbelly of this city, a king who didn't take orders from anyone. He walked toward the boutique, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to collide with mine in a way that would shatter both of our worlds forever. Within minutes, a single, impossible question would be asked in this very room, a question that would change my destiny and make a ruthless Mafia don drop to his knees. Before we reveal that explosive moment and the dark secret that followed, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now. Turn on notifications and smash that like button, because you do not want to miss how a forgotten girl became the most powerful woman in the underworld. The boutique doors chimed as he entered, the sound sharp and ominous. Don Alessandro walked into the room, and the air instantly turned to ice. Victoria and her friends froze, their cruel laughter dying instantly in their throats as they recognized the absolute authority radiating from him. He didn't look at them. His piercing gray eyes scanned the room until they locked directly onto me. He had heard every single word of their mockery. And in the world of the Mafia, disrespect was a sin punishable by blood. The silence in the boutique was heavy, almost suffocating. Victoria and her friends stood frozen, their faces turning pale as Don Alessandro stepped closer. He didn't look at the glittering necklaces or the gold watches. His eyes remained fixed entirely on me, reading the humiliation written on my face. "Is there a problem here?" Alessandro's voice was a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Victoria swallowed hard, trying to force a charming smile onto her lips, though her hands were visibly shaking. "No, Don Alessandro, we were just discussing the jewelry. Some pieces simply require a certain aesthetic." Alessandro stopped right in front of my counter. He looked down at my hands, which were still clutching the polishing cloth, and then looked up at my manager, who had rushed out from the back office, sweating profusely. "I asked a question," Alessandro said, his tone dropping an octave, sending a chill down my spine. "And I do not like to ask twice." The manager bowed his head repeatedly, his voice cracking. "Nothing is wrong, sir. Just a minor misunderstanding with the staff." Alessandro ignored him completely. He reached across the glass counter, his large, scarred hand moving with surprising gentleness, and captured my wrist. His grip was warm, firm, and completely commanding. He lifted my hand, turning it over to look at my fingers, which Victoria had just mocked moments ago. "The diamonds in this store are weak," Alessandro murmured, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch in my throat. "They lack fire, but they would look exceptional on you." He turned his head slightly to glance at my manager, his expression turning into ice. "Who owns this establishment?" "Mr. Vance, sir," the manager stammered, wiping his brow, "but he is currently out of the country." "He is not," Alessandro interrupted coldly. "He sold the debt of this building to my syndicate last week, which means, as of 5 minutes ago, I own this entire block." A collective gasp echoed through the room. Victoria took a step back, her eyes wide with sudden terror. Alessandro didn't look at her. He kept his grip on my wrist, drawing me just a fraction closer across the counter. "I am buying the entire inventory of this store right now, in cash." The manager's mouth fell open. "Sir? Everything?" "Everything," Alessandro barked. "But my purchase comes with 2 absolute conditions." He pointed a finger directly at Victoria and her group. "First, these women are stripped of their elite memberships. They are banned from this establishment, and their names will be blacklisted across every luxury house in the city. If they ever step foot near this door again, my men will handle it." Victoria looked as if she had been slapped. She opened her mouth to protest, but one look from Alessandro's guard made her choke on her words. They hurried out of the store, their heels clicking frantically against the floor. "And the second condition, sir?" the manager asked, his voice trembling. Alessandro looked back at me, a dark, unreadable emotion swirling in his gray eyes. "This woman is no longer a cashier. As of this exact second, she is the chief executive officer of this store. She answers only to me." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Sir, I don't know how to run a business like this," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You will learn," Alessandro said, his thumb brushing against the back of my hand. "Because you possess something these vultures never will: resilience." But before the manager could even begin to process the paperwork, the glass front doors didn't just chime, they shattered. A heavy brick crashed through the display window, followed by the blinding glare of high-beam headlights. A stolen delivery van reversed violently into the storefront, crushing the elegant display cases into twisted metal and dust. "Ambush!" one of Alessandro's bodyguards screamed, drawing his weapon. Gunfire erupted instantly, the deafening cracks echoing off the marble walls. I screamed, ducking behind the heavy oak counter as glass rained down like deadly snow. Alessandro didn't panic. He drew a sleek black pistol from beneath his jacket with terrifying speed, firing 3 precise shots into the smoke filling the entrance. Through the chaos, I saw a man in a black tactical mask slipping through the broken window, aiming a rifle directly at Alessandro's exposed back. Alessandro was focused on 2 targets in front of him, completely unaware of the threat from behind. My body moved before my mind could register the danger. I grabbed a heavy, solid gold candelabra from the counter display and threw my weight forward, swinging it with everything I had. The solid metal struck the attacker squarely in the side of his helmet. The blow distracted him, causing his rifle shot to go wild, tearing into the ceiling instead of Alessandro's spine. Alessandro spun around instantly. In a fraction of a second, he neutralized the attacker with a single shot to the chest. The remaining shooters outside, realizing their element of surprise was gone and their primary target was still standing, sped away into the rainy night, their tires screeching. Silence returned to the ruined boutique, broken only by the sound of the store's alarm and my own ragged breathing. I was shaking, covered in dust, sitting amidst millions of dollars of ruined diamonds. Alessandro lowered his weapon. He looked at the fallen assassin, then slowly turned his gaze to me. There was a dangerous flare of curiosity and something deeply obsessive in his eyes. He walked over, stepping over the broken glass, and offered me his hand once more. This time, it wasn't just an act of authority. "You saved my life, Elena," he said, using my name for the first time. "A dangerous move. Now, you belong in my world." The ride to Don Alessandro's estate was completely silent, save for the heavy hum of the armored SUV's engine and the steady drum of rain against the bulletproof glass. I sat pressed against the leather seat, staring at my hands. They were still stained with soot and jewelry polish, My mind raced, trying to process the madness of the last hour. I had gone from a humiliated cashier to saving the life of the city's most feared mafia boss. Alessandro sat beside me, his large frame filling the space. He didn't say a word, but I could feel his gaze heavy on my profile. Every few moments, his eyes would drop to my hands, tracing the curves of my fingers, before returning to the dark road ahead. We pulled up to a massive, iron-gated mansion nestled deep in the hills. Armed guards stood at every corner, their faces grim under the heavy rain. This wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. "Step inside, Elena," Alessandro commanded softly as the car door was opened for us. The interior of the mansion was breathtaking, all dark marble, towering columns, and gold accents. It was beautiful, but it felt cold. It felt like a cage. Alessandro led me into a massive study lined with leather-bound books. A fire crackled in the hearth, throwing long, dancing shadows across the room. He stepped behind a heavy mahogany desk and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, sliding one toward me. "Drink," he said. "It will calm your nerves." I didn't touch the glass. I kept my chin high despite the fear tearing through my chest. "I don't want to drink, Don Alessandro. I want to know why I am here. You bought the store, you saved me from those women, but this feels different." Alessandro leaned back in his chair, his gray eyes darkening. The gentleman from the jewelry store was gone. In his place sat a cold, ruthless predator. "You saved my life tonight, Elena. In my world, that makes you a hero. But it also makes you a liability," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "The men who attacked me tonight were sent by the Moretti family. They don't leave witnesses. If I leave you out there, you are a dead woman." "So you brought me here to protect me?" I asked, taking a step forward. "Protection comes at a price," Alessandro replied, standing up and walking around the desk. He stopped just inches from me. He was so tall, I had to tilt my head back to look him in the eyes. "I don't trust easily. In fact, I don't trust at all. Before I put my men's lives on the line to guard yours, I need to know exactly who you are." He reached out, his thumb catching a strand of my dark hair and tucking it behind my ear. His touch was electric, making a shiver run down my spine. But his eyes were dead serious. "I have run a background check on you, Elena. You are drowning in family debts. Your father owes hundreds of thousands to loan sharks, men who answer to my rivals," Alessandro said, his tone turning clinical. "A desperate woman with a debt that high is easy to buy. How do I know you weren't placed in that jewelry shop to watch me? How do I know that little stunt with the candelabra wasn't just a show to earn my trust?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. My shock quickly turned into hot, blinding anger. "Are you serious?" I snapped, stepping right into his space, forgetting for a moment who he was. "You think I wanted any of this? I work 12 hours a day just to keep my family from being murdered by monsters like you. I didn't ask you to walk into my shop. I didn't ask those vicious women to mock me. And I certainly didn't plan on a van crashing through the window." Alessandro didn't flinch. A slow, terrifying smirk spread across his lips. He liked the fire in me. "Good. Give me that anger," he murmured. "But anger isn't proof. Loyalty is proven under pressure." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a heavy silver revolver. He placed it firmly on the mahogany desk between us with a dull, terrifying thud. "Here is your ultimatum, Elena." "Your test," Alessandro said, his gray eyes locking onto mine like a vice. "The loan sharks holding your family's debt are currently tied up in my basement. They are the ones who gave the Moretti family the green light to use your shop for the ambush." He pointed to the gun. "Pick up the weapon, come downstairs with me, and pull the trigger. Eliminate the threat to your family and prove to me that you choose my side. If you do, your debts are wiped clean, and you will live like a queen. If you refuse, I will assume you are soft, or worse, an informant. And I will have my men dump you back on the streets to face the Moretti family alone." He stepped back, crossing his arms over his broad chest. "One impossible question, Elena. Are you a victim, or are you a survivor? Choose." My heart pounded furiously against my ribs. The cold steel of the gun seemed to glow under the firelight. This was the moment. My old life was completely gone, shattered like the glass of the jewelry store. If I picked up that gun, there would be no turning back. Slowly, my trembling fingers reached out and closed around the heavy grip of the revolver. The heavy steel of the gun felt freezing against my skin, but as I lifted it from the mahogany desk, a strange, calm clarity washed over me. I looked up into Alessandro's gray eyes. He was waiting for me to break. He expected a terrified girl to crumble under the weight of his world. But I was tired of being terrified. I was tired of being the girl who hid in the shadows while everyone else decided her worth. "Lead the way," I said, my voice steady, though every nerve in my body was on fire. Alessandro's eyes flared with a sudden, dark satisfaction. He didn't say a word. He simply turned and led me down a hidden, winding concrete staircase deep into the bowels of the estate. The air grew colder, damp with the smell of old stone and metallic iron. At the bottom of the stairs was a heavy, reinforced door. Two of Alessandro's guards stood outside, bowing their heads as the dawn approached. When the door swung open, the harsh fluorescent light blinded me for a second. In the center of the concrete room, tied securely to heavy steel chairs, were two men. I recognized them instantly. They were the vicious loan sharks who had terrorized my father for months, threatening to burn our house down with us inside. Now, they were bloody, bruised, and weeping. "Don Alessandro, please," one of them begged, his voice high and pathetic. "We didn't know the shop belonged to you. We were just told to give the Moretti family the timing of the delivery." Alessandro stepped inside, pulling me gently by the waist to stand right in front of them. The warmth of his hand against my spine was a sharp contrast to the freezing room. "You brought terror to this woman's family," Alessandro said, his voice entirely devoid of human emotion. "And tonight, you brought a war to my doorstep. Elena, look at them." I stared down at the men who had made my life a living hell. They looked up at me, their eyes widening in shock as they realized a plus-size cashier from a jewelry boutique was holding the weapon that would decide their fate. "She is the one you threatened," Alessandro continued, his hand moving to cover my trembling fingers on the grip of the gun. He raised my arm, aiming the barrel directly at the first man's chest. "Take your revenge, Elena. Erase your past." My finger rested on the cold trigger. The room was deathly quiet. I could hear the rapid thumping of my own heart. I looked at the pathetic, weeping men. If I pulled this trigger, I would become just like Alessandro. I would become a monster. Slowly, deliberately, I lowered the barrel. I turned my head to look directly into Alessandro's piercing gaze. "No," I said firmly. Alessandro's jaw tightened, his brow furrowing in dangerous confusion. "You defy me? After everything I told you?" "I am a survivor, Alessandro, but I am not a murderer," I said, my voice ringing clearly through the concrete cell. "If I kill them, I am doing your dirty work. I am proving I can be manipulated by fear. If you want them dead, do it yourself. My loyalty to you isn't proven by blood. It's proven by the fact that I stood by your side during an ambush when your own men failed to watch your back." The guards in the room held their breath, terrified of how the Don would react to such defiance. For 3 long, agonizing seconds, Alessandro stared at me, his face an unreadable mask of stone. Then, unexpectedly, a low, deep chuckle vibrated in his chest. The laughter turned into a dark grin that completely transformed his rugged face. He reached out and gently took the revolver from my hand, sliding it back into his jacket. "Brilliant," Alessandro whispered, his eyes blazing with an intense, intoxicating obsession. "You didn't break. You didn't give in to fear, and you didn't give in to mindless bloodlust. You have a spine of steel, Elena." He turned to his guards, his expression flipping instantly back to cold authority. "Keep them alive. Take everything they own, their properties, their cash, their businesses. Transfer every single asset to Elena's family name. By morning, their debt is not only erased, but they will owe her everything." "Yes, Don Alessandro," the guards chorused. Alessandro wrapped his arm firmly around my waist, pulling me tightly against his side as he walked me out of the basement. I could feel the possessive, overwhelming heat radiating from him. "You passed the test, Elena," he murmured, as we ascended back into the luxury of his mansion. "From this moment on, nobody touches you. Nobody mocks you. You are under my absolute protection, and the world is about to see exactly how beautiful my obsession can be." The next morning, the transformation began. I woke up in a luxurious velvet-draped bedroom to the sound of soft voices. When I opened my eyes, a team of high-end fashion designers and tailors were standing at the foot of my bed, looking nervous. Alessandro walked into the room, dressed in a fresh, perfectly tailored charcoal suit. He looked at the lead designer, a thin, arrogant man who was holding up a loose, dark, oversized dress. "What is that?" Alessandro asked, his voice dripping with immediate distaste. It's a standard design, Don Alessandro," the designer stammered, holding the fabric up nervously. To soften the silhouette for a lady of her proportions." Alessandro marched across the room, grabbed the fabric out of the designer's hands, and ripped it completely in half with a terrifying display of strength. The pieces fluttered uselessly to the floor. "Listen to me carefully," Alessandro growled, stepping into the designer's personal space. "You will not hide a single curve of her body. You will not try to make her blend into the background like those fragile, hollow women in the jewelry store. You will use the finest silks, the heaviest velvets. You will design gowns that accentuate her fullness, that celebrate her power. I want every line of her body emphasized. She is a goddess, and you will dress her like one. If I see you try to cover her up again, I will have your hands cut off." The designer turned pale as a ghost, nodding frantically. "Yes, Don Alessandro, right away. Crimson silk, emerald velvet, we will make her stunning." For the next 3 days, the mansion became a whirlwind of luxury. Tailors measured my body with absolute reverence. I watched in the mirror as they draped me in deep, royal emerald velvet that clung perfectly to my hips, a plunging neckline that celebrated my chest, and a golden corset that defined my waist. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt mesmerizing. Every night, Alessandro would sit in the armchair of my dressing room, sipping whiskey, his eyes tracking every single curve as the fabrics changed. His gaze wasn't just lustful, it was entirely worshipful. He was building a queen, piece by piece, and his obsession was growing into something unstoppable. "You look breathtaking, Elena," he whispered on the third night, stepping up behind me as I stared at my reflection in a stunning ruby-red gown. He placed his large hands on my waist, his fingers digging into the velvet. "The elite of this city think they define beauty. Tonight, we are going to show them how wrong they are." The grand ballroom of the Sapphire Lounge was a sea of glittering diamonds and arrogant smiles. This was the annual Winter Gala, where the city's wealthiest families met to flaunt their status. Among them stood Victoria and her friends, sipping expensive champagne and whispering like vipers. They thought they were safe. They thought their elite world would never be touched. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the ballroom slammed open. The chatter in the room died instantly as 24 armed guards in black suits stepped inside, clearing a wide path. Then he walked in. Don Alessandro looked imposing, his presence commanding absolute silence. But he wasn't looking at the crowd. He turned, offering his arm to the woman beside him. I stepped into the ballroom, and a collective gasp echoed through the elite crowd. I was wearing the custom emerald velvet gown. It hugged every single curve of my plus-size figure, the rich fabric catching the light of the crystal chandeliers. A massive diamond necklace, salvaged from the ruins of the jewelry boutique, rested on my collarbone. My hair was swept up, and my chin was held high. I was no longer the invisible cashier. I was magnificent. "Is that the girl from the shop?" Victoria whispered, her glass trembling in her hand. "It can't be. She's monstrously huge." Before she could finish her sentence, Alessandro's sharp gaze snapped to her. The temperature in the room plummeted. He didn't say a word, but his hand tightened possessively on my waist, pulling me flush against his side. "Enjoy the view, ladies and gentlemen," Alessandro's voice boomed through the silent ballroom. "Because you are looking at the new order of this city." But the night of triumph was cut short. As Alessandro moved toward the VIP lounge to speak with his capos, a waiter bumped into me, spilling red wine onto the edge of my gown. "Oh, my apologies, ma'am. Let me help you," the waiter stammered, pulling out a white cloth. "It's fine. I'll take care of it in the restroom," I said, sighing. I signaled to Alessandro's guards that I would be right back. They moved to follow me, but the crowded ballroom made it difficult to keep close. The moment I stepped into the quiet, dimly lit hallway leading to the powder room, the air changed. A heavy hand suddenly clapped over my mouth, smelling strongly of chloroform. I struggled, throwing my weight backward, but another man grabbed my arms, pinning them behind my back. They dragged me down a service stairwell, out into the freezing alley behind the lounge. A black van was waiting, its engine idling. "Get her in! Move, move!" a rough voice shouted. It was a hit squad from the Moretti family. They threw me into the back of the van, tying my wrists with thick plastic zip ties. A man with a scarred face leaned over me, pointing a suppressed pistol at my forehead. "Listen to me, you fat cow," the scarred man growled. "Your little boyfriend took everything from our associates. You're going to call him on this phone, and you're going to tell him to hand over the shipping docks, or we'll paint this van with your brains." They thrust a ringing phone into my face. On the screen, I saw Alessandro's name. The scarred man pressed answer and held it to my ear, whispering, "Speak, or die." "Elena?" Alessandro's voice came through the line, vibrating with cold fury. He already knew I was gone. "Where are you?" I looked at the gun pressed against my forehead. I looked at the vicious men who thought they could use me to break the king of the city. I thought about the girl who used to hide, who used to let people push her around. She was dead. "Alessandro!" I screamed into the phone with everything I had. "They are in a black van behind the Sapphire Lounge. Don't give them anything. Kill them all." The scarred man cursed loudly, smashing the phone against the floor and backhanding me across the face. The blow cut my lip, the metallic taste of blood filling my mouth. "You stupid bitch!" he roared, raising his gun again. "You just signed your death warrant." "No," I spat, staring directly into his eyes, refusing to cry. "I signed yours." Before the van could even shift into drive, the rear doors were completely torn off their hinges. Alessandro stood in the alleyway, looking like the devil himself. He didn't wait. He moved with blinding, brutal speed. He lunged into the van, grabbing the scarred man by the throat and slamming his head against the metal wall with a sickening crack. Gunfire erupted in the tight space, but Alessandro's guards were already neutralizing the driver and the other kidnapper. Alessandro dragged the scarred man out into the rain-soaked alley, throwing him onto the concrete like a sack of garbage. He didn't use a gun. He used his bare hands, raining down devastating blows until the man was barely breathing, his face unrecognizable. "Please, mercy," the rival mobster groaned into the puddle of bloody water. Alessandro stopped, wiping the blood from his knuckles with a silk handkerchief. He looked down at the broken man with utter disgust. "You made 2 mistakes tonight," Alessandro said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "First, you thought you could threaten my territory. Second, and most fatally, you dared to put your filthy hands on my queen." He turned back to the van, stepping inside and immediately cutting the ties on my wrists. His rough hands became incredibly gentle as he lifted me up, cradling me against his chest as if I were made of glass. "Are you hurt, milady?" he whispered, his eyes scanning my face, his thumb softly brushing the blood from my lip. "I'm fine," I breathed, wrapping my arms around his neck. "I told you I was a survivor." A dark, intensely proud smile spread across his lips. "That you are. And now, it's time to show the world who rules by my side." Alessandro carried me back into the grand ballroom of the Sapphire Lounge, stepping right through the main doors. The entire room went dead silent. My emerald velvet gown was torn at the shoulder, and a small smudge of blood stained my lip, but I held my head up like absolute royalty. Alessandro's clothes were covered in the rain and blood of his enemies, yet he looked completely untouchable. He didn't stop until we reached the center stage of the ballroom, where the city's elite stood frozen in sheer terror. Victoria was watching from the front row, her glass slipping from her fingers and shattering loudly against the marble floor. Alessandro stepped up to the microphone, his large hand resting firmly, possessively on the small of my back. He looked out at the crowd of billionaires, politicians, and mob bosses, his gray eyes flashing with lethal authority. "Tonight, some of you thought you could test my boundaries." Alessandro's voice boomed through the high-end sound system, echoing off the crystal chandeliers. "Some of you thought you could use this woman to bring me to my knees. You failed. The Moretti family is gone. Their territory belongs to me, and anyone else who dares to breathe a word against her will face the exact same fate." He turned to me, his expression softening into an intense, worshipful gaze. He took the massive, flawless diamond ring from his pocket, the very ring Victoria had claimed wouldn't fit my fingers, and slowly slid it onto my hand. It fit perfectly, glittering brilliantly under the ballroom lights. "She is no longer just a survivor," Alessandro announced, lifting my hand for the entire room to see. "She is the CEO of my businesses. She is the keeper of my heart. She is your queen. You will bow to her, or you will bleed." One by one, the powerful men and women in the crowd bowed their heads in absolute submission. Victoria dropped to her knees, weeping, unable to look me in the eye. I looked down at them, feeling the immense power of my new life. I was no longer the invisible plus-size cashier. I was the most powerful woman in the city, standing side by side with the king who worshipped every single curve of my body. What would you do if a ruthless Mafia don bought an entire store just to defend your honor? Would you have the courage to pass his brutal test of loyalty, or would you run away back to your ordinary life? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with your friends. Until next time on the dark side of romance.